You're my world, Cilla Black. Music's loss was television's gain. The Beatles weren't the only fabulous artists to come out of Liverpool at the start of the 60s, of course. That era also saw the spectacular arrival of an incredibly talented lady who, over the ensuing decades, was to become one of my very close friends. Cilla Black, or Priscilla White as she still was then, started out as the cloakroom girl and an occasional amateur singer at the Cavern Club when the Beatles were still basically the house band there. After the Beatles' manager Brian Epstein took her under his wing, she enjoyed a meteoric rise to success. It came after a false start. Cilla's debut single, Love of the Loved, written for her by John Lennon and Paul McCartney, only just crept into the top 40 when it came out in 1963. Its follow-up at the beginning of the following year was a very different matter. The great Dionne Warwick had had a big US hit at the end of 1963 with Anyone Who Had a Heart, written for her by Burt Bacharach and Hal David. Bacharach and David were a Rolls-Royce of songwriters, of course, and when George Martin heard the song, he thought it could make a great follow-up single for Cilla. How right he was. Before Dionne's label could put her version of the song out in Britain, Cilla recorded it with George Martin and EMI rushed it out. Cilla was still basically unknown at this point, but when people heard her terrific version, the effect was phenomenal. She suited the song, and the song suited her. She had such a strong voice, and it was an obviously English voice, not mid-Atlantic at all, and the song allowed it to soar. The radio DJs played Anyone Who Had a Heart non-stop. The public fell in love with it, and it raced up the charts to number 1. What an arrival! Everybody loved Cilla's take on the song, except Dionne Warwick. I have been fortunate enough to get to know Dionne a little over the years, and she is a truly legendary talent with an extraordinary career that is still going. But in 1964, she definitely felt Cilla had stolen her thunder and her song. In fact, Dionne was pretty miffed, allegedly. She called Cilla's version of the song a copy and passed some harsh comments in her press interviews. I heard about one where Dionne apparently said, "If I had coughed when I recorded the song, that woman would have coughed as well." Now, I understand Dionne's irritation, but I think that comment is a tad unfair. Cilla's version wasn't just a copy. She sang the same melody, of course, but she had a different type of vocal to Dionne. Dionne's voice is cool and mellifluous. When Cilla's voice went high, it was tight and strong. Both versions were great. Thankfully, there was no controversy at all around Cilla's follow-up single, the song I've selected for our Head Full of Music. It was absolutely phenomenal, and it equaled the performance of Anyone Who Had a Heart, climbing to number 1. It was called You're My World. The song was originally a big Italian ballad by a guy called Umberto Bindi, called Il Mio Mondo. The funny thing is that I have heard that version, and how can I put this? It is really not my cup of tea. The fact that Cilla and George Martin were able to turn it into something as brilliant as they did is quite miraculous. Because You're My World is wonderful. It demonstrated just what a marvelous voice Cilla had. She sang the soft, low-end part of the song beautifully, and then when she went for the big notes, she hit them gloriously. You felt like applauding. She took that sow's ear of an Italian ballad and turned it into a silk purse. When those two songs went to number 1 in quick succession, it felt as if a new musical superstar had arrived. Paul McCartney and John Lennon wrote Cilla's next single, It's For You, which went top 10. Cilla was a lot of fun. Singing with her felt very easy, and we hit it off straight away. I had a longer association with the Cilla show when the BBC used it to choose the song that I was to sing for Britain in the 1968 Eurovision Song Contest. I did a different song every week for 7 weeks, and the viewers wrote in to vote for the one they liked the most. The winner was the last one I sang. Congratulations. I was to make a similar career journey to Cilla in 1970 when I began hosting my own Sunday night BBC show, It's Cliff Richard. I enjoyed it, but ultimately, I've always been primarily a singer, and I returned to music. Once Cilla began doing TV, she was so good at it and loved doing it so much that it became her world. Television viewers loved her because she was so quick-witted and warm, and she could talk to anybody about anything. She had that natural Scouse humor where she could always think of something to say to make everybody laugh. She became one of the most popular and highest-paid telepresenters of all time. I never forgot how great Cilla's voice was. I always thought it was such a shame that she largely stopped making records in the 80s and 90s as her TV career took off. And early in the new millennium, I had a proposition for her. In 2004, I was playing my summer nights tour of national British landmarks such as Chatsworth House, Edinburgh Castle, and Blickling Hall. I knew that Cilla was going to be in England when I played a show at Leeds Castle in Kent in July, and I asked her if she would appear as my special guest. I think by now Cilla had actually stopped thinking of herself as a singer, and she stared at me shocked. "I can't do that, Jook," she gasped. "Oh, come on, you can." "But I haven't sung in ages." I managed to talk her round, and she came to a couple of rehearsals. We were going to sing It Takes Two, the old Marvin Gaye and Kim Weston song. Cilla was very nervous at first, but she didn't sound crackly or croaky. She still sounded like Cilla Black. It was such a thrill to hear that fantastic voice again, close up. We even learned a few dance steps. On the day, Cilla got an enormous cheer as I announced her and she came out. She was sensational, of course. She was always going to be. You don't lose talent like Cilla's. She was a born performer. Singing and entertaining a crowd came as naturally to her as breathing. The very best of Cilla Black went to the top of the albums chart. It was the only #1 album she'd ever had. 3 years after Cilla died, I sang a duet with her remastered vocals on a tribute album, Cilla, with the Royal Liverpool Philharmonic Orchestra. Rebecca Ferguson and Sheridan Smith also appeared. It was so moving to sing with my dear friend one last time, and I chose my favorite of her songs, You're My World. I know, to many people, Cilla Black will always be a television personality and light entertainer. To me, though, she'll always be that fabulous singer who set the music world alight with those 2 #1 singles in 1964. Just listen to that voice again. Mark my words. She was a singer, and a magnificent one at that. Miss you, Chook.